From betrayal to subtle revenge. What happened when I learned the truth? The key turned in the lock with a dry click. My footsteps on the parquet floor sounded unusually loud in the silence of the house. Something was off. Everything looked as it always did. The light in the hallway, an unfinished cup of tea on the kitchen table, scattered magazines near the sofa. But the atmosphere felt foreign. I could feel it in my soul. The living room was empty. Elisa always greeted me at the door, even if it was just a quick, "Hi," from the stairs as she rushed to finish something. This time, nothing. I walked into the kitchen. A pot was on the stove, its contents still steaming. It looked like she cooked for herself, but wasn't waiting for me. Heading upstairs, I noticed a thin line of light under the bedroom door. Muffled noises came from inside. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my head. At first, I thought she was on the phone, but the sounds were deeper. A man's voice. Unfamiliar. I stopped in front of the door, taking a deep breath. Thoughts swarmed in my mind. Who is this? Why are they in our bedroom? Am I overreacting? But eavesdropping wasn't my style. I was already reaching for the doorknob when I heard the words that froze me in place. "Are you sure he won't find out?" The man's voice was low and commanding. "He doesn't notice anything." Elisa's voice was light, almost cheerful. "And even if he does, what could he do? He's never had the guts to stop me." I felt the world around me come to a halt. My legs turned to jelly, and my arms felt heavy. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I stood there in the dark, listening to my wife tell another man that I was nothing to her. "And if he suspects something?" the stranger asked cautiously. "Then we'll just end it sooner. Honestly, I'm tired of playing this game." "But, Alex, you know I'm doing this for us." His name? Alex. A surge of rage washed over me, urging me to open the door and confront them. But instead, I stepped back. My mind screamed at me to act, but my body refused. I walked to my study, sank into the chair, and stared into nothingness. An hour later, I heard the bedroom door open. Light footsteps, the kind I didn't recognize, not the ones I was used to hearing in our home, descended the stairs and exited through the back door. I waited. Elisa came into the study about 15 minutes later. "Oh, you're home?" She looked surprised, but her tone was overly casual. "Yes, I came back a bit early," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She quickly changed the subject to something mundane. "How was work? Have you eaten?" I listened to her, but it was as if she were a stranger. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, I took her phone. The password was the same as always. Her messages with Alex revealed everything. Their plans, their jokes about me, even memories of the places they met. My heart was breaking, but no tears came. I read every message, every "I miss you," every "I love you," and pieced myself together. I couldn't just accept this. The morning was strange. The sun filtered through the half-closed blinds, illuminating the room that had once been my sanctuary. I lay next to the woman I thought I knew to her very core. Her hair spread across the pillow, her breathing even and calm. How could she sleep so peacefully after what she had done? One question kept looping in my mind. Should I confront her? Could my nerves handle it? Silence was no longer an option. My fingers curled into a fist, and the emotion that had consumed me all night, searing pain from betrayal, took hold again. When Elisa opened her eyes, her gaze met mine. She smiled, as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't a smile. It was a dagger to my heart. "Good morning," she stretched, looking as if no shadow of doubt had ever touched her. I stayed silent. I just stared at her, searching for any sign of remorse. Her face remained calm. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked, perhaps sensing the intensity of my gaze. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Everything I had bottled up spilled out in a flood of words. How could you? Where is the woman I loved all these years? Did she ever exist? Her eyes widened, and I saw a flicker of fear. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to know. "What are you talking about?" Her voice wavered, but she tried to sound confident. "I know, Elisa. I know about Alex. I heard you yesterday, saw your messages. You didn't even try to hide it." Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but then stopped. "Were you planning to keep lying to my face?" laughing at the fact that I loved you? It's not what you think, she began, but I raised my hand to stop her. Not what I think. Do you even understand what you've done? Was our entire life a lie? Her tears came suddenly. She grabbed my hands, trying to hold me, to convince me that everything could still be fixed. Artem, please listen to me. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. A mistake? This went on for months. This isn't just a mistake. It's a choice. You chose him over us. She fell silent, lowering her head. The oppressive silence in the room felt suffocating. My heart clenched with pain. I didn't want to lose her, but I couldn't forgive her either. Why, Elisa? What was missing? Why couldn't you just tell me you didn't love me anymore? It's complicated, she whispered, wiping her tears. I felt lost. Alex he made me feel alive. Her words were the final straw. I stood up, feeling the blood pulsing in my temples. Alive? And me? What am I to you? Just a shadow? The person who was there when you decided you needed entertainment? She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any words. I left the room, leaving her sitting on the bed in the shattering quiet. Downstairs, in the living room, I stopped. My heart ached so much it felt like it was no longer there. Did I have the strength to continue this life? Suddenly, the phone on the table vibrated. A new message from Alex lit up the screen. How is she? Are we still on track? The phone sat on the table like an invitation I couldn't ignore. The message from Alex burned on the screen. How is she? Are we still on track? I felt anger rising inside me. Their plan? What did that even mean? I picked up the phone, gripping it tightly as though it might explode under the weight of my emotions. The room was completely silent. Elisa remained upstairs, likely drowning her remorse in tears, but I no longer cared. In front of me now lay something bigger than betrayal. It was a conspiracy, and I intended to uncover the entire truth. I opened their conversation. Messages from Alex filled the screen, each word cutting like a knife. He won't suspect a thing. Just keep playing the caring wife. Remember, we need his signature on those documents. If he finds out, the plan falls apart. We can't take that risk. My heart tightened with each word I read. This was more than infidelity. They were using me. I scrolled further and saw how they discussed my company, my money, even my home. He practically handed you the keys. After that, everything will be ours. This wasn't love. This was a cold-blooded game, and I was the victim. My fingers trembled, but I kept control. The anger burned hot, but my mind stayed cold. If they wanted to play games with me, fine. I'd show them what a real game looked like. Elisa came downstairs to the kitchen. Her eyes were still red from crying, but she tried to appear composed. She sat at the table across from me, searching for the right words. Artem, we need to talk? Oh, we'll talk, all right, I interrupted, placing the phone on the table with the chat open for her to see. She froze, her face first filling with horror, then turning expressionless. She knew there was no point in lying anymore. You read it? Oh, I didn't just read it. I know everything now. I know how you and your lover plan to use me. My company, my money, my home. You took everything that was most precious to me and destroyed it. That's not what you think? She tried to defend herself, but her voice sounded weak. Not what I think. I laughed, but it was a cold laugh, full of anger. Maybe you can explain what this plan was? How you were going to pull it off? Elisa started to speak, but every word she said was unconvincing. She shifted the blame onto Alex, saying it was all his plan and that she was simply under his influence. I didn't want this, Artem. It was all him. He made me do it. I was confused. I didn't know how to stop it. I stood up from the table, unable to listen to her excuses any longer. You think I'll believe you? You, who lied to my face for months. You knew what you were doing. You made your choice. But I love you, she cried, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face again. Love? Love doesn't involve betrayal. Love doesn't involve conspiracies. If you loved me, then it was the ugliest love I've ever seen in my life. I walked to the door, leaving her in the kitchen. But before I left, Elisa called out, Artem, please, give me a chance to fix this. I turned around, looking her straight in the eyes. You already had your chance. You destroyed it yourself. We need to start an official investigation, he said. I've gathered some preliminary evidence, but we'll need more testimonies and a financial audit. Do whatever it takes. I have another idea. I told him what I'd discovered about Alex. We decided to use it to create additional pressure. If he thought he could manipulate me, he was sorely mistaken. The next day, I received a call from the detective. There's something interesting. Alex often visits a restaurant downtown. He meets there with people who are likely his accomplices. I think you'll want to see this. Send me the address. I knew this meeting would mark the beginning of the end for Alex and Elisa. The restaurant was one of those places a successful, confident man would want to show off. Large panoramic windows, the low hum of conversations, and the clinking of crystal glasses created an atmosphere of luxury. But this time, I wasn't here for dinner or to meet friends. I was here to end the game they started. Alex sat at a table near the window, his back to me. His posture was relaxed, his movements confident. A glass of wine sat in front of him, and he was attentively listening to his companion, a tall man in an expensive suit. Their faces occasionally lit up with faint smiles, as if they were pleased with their discussion. I stayed near the entrance, observing him. The words I planned to say spun in my head. Was I ready for this confrontation? Ready. I had a plan, and now it all depended on how Alex would react. A waiter approached, asking if I needed a table. I waved him off and began walking toward Alex's table. Every step echoed in my mind like a countdown before an explosion. Alex looked up as I stopped in front of him. At first, his expression showed mild surprise, but within seconds, I saw something resembling fear in his eyes. Artem? His voice was calm, but there was already a trace of tension in it. Good evening, Alex, I said, pulling out an empty chair and sitting across from him, ignoring the curious glance from his companion. What are you doing here? Ending the game, I said, placing my phone on the table and playing a voice message Elisa had sent him a few days ago. Alex, he doesn't suspect a thing. We're almost at our goal. The main thing is to get him to sign the papers next week. Alex paled. His companion looked at him with suspicion. What's this? The man asked, but Alex silenced him with a gesture. Artem, is this some kind of joke? No, Alex, this is no joke. This is the end of your fraudulent game. Did you think you could use me like any other fool? Well, this time, you picked the wrong opponent. I pulled out several papers from my folder and threw them on the table. Here are your contracts. Here's proof of your schemes. Here are reports of your debts and criminal activities. And now, it's not just me who knows, but also your dear friend here. Alex tensed, gripping his wine glass so tightly I half expected it to shatter. You don't understand what you're doing, he hissed, leaning closer. Oh, I understand perfectly, Alex. And I'm going to make sure you understand what it feels like to lose everything. His companion stood up from his chair. I think this is a personal matter. I'd better leave. Sit, I said firmly, stopping him. You'll want to hear who you're dealing with. Alex shot me a furious glare, but I paid no attention. Alex, you have no idea how quickly your life is about to fall apart. One phone call is all it takes for your creditors to learn about all your schemes. Elisa won't stay out of it, either. She'll be a witness against you. You're bluffing, he said, trying to regain his composure. Think so? I smirked, holding up my phone. I have enough evidence to not only strip you of your money, but also put you behind bars. Do you think I'll give you a chance to wiggle out of this? Alex leaned back in his chair, but his face remained tense. What do you want, Artem? I want you out of my life, and out of Elisa's life. Forever. If you so much as try to contact me again, I'll release everything. And then your game will be over for good. He said nothing, only staring at me, as if trying to gauge how serious I was. I stood up, leaving the documents on the table. The game's over, Alex. It's all in my hands now. I walked away, leaving him at the table with a furious expression and a pile of evidence that could destroy his life. When I returned home, Elisa was waiting for me in the kitchen. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red. What did you do? What I had to do. Alex will no longer be a part of our lives. You've ruined everything, Artem. No, Elisa. You ruined everything. Now it's my turn to rebuild. But without you. Her tears began to flow, but I felt nothing for her anymore. Just emptiness. Elisa stood by the kitchen table, clutching a cup of cold coffee. Her shoulders were slightly slumped, and her eyes, red from crying. She was waiting for me to say something, anything, but I remained silent. Her earlier words played in my head. I made a mistake, but I'm ready to prove I still love you. I looked at her, feeling anger and disappointment mixing with the void. Her face was full of regret, but was it genuine? Or just another ploy to keep me? Why do you think I'd believe you again? I finally said, my voice cold. She looked away as if my words struck her. Because you should know that I didn't do this out of hatred for you. It was a mistake, a weakness, but it never meant I stopped loving you. I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. Love? Love, Elisa, is honesty and trust, not betrayal and conspiracy. She sat down at the table across from me, placing her cup down. You're right. I lost your trust, and I know it can't be rebuilt in a day. But I want you to hear me out. I'll tell you everything. No lies. Just give me a chance. I crossed my arms, refusing to let my emotions take over. You have 5 minutes, I said, leaning closer. Tell me the whole truth. Starting from the moment you decided to betray me. She took a deep breath, and I noticed her hands trembling. It started a few months ago. Alex and I met through mutual friends. At first, it was just conversations, nothing more. But he was different. He listened to me when you were busy with work. I know it sounds like an excuse, but I felt lonely. Lonely? And you didn't think to tell me about it instead of running to someone else? I was afraid you wouldn't understand, that you'd think I was ungrateful or just trying to get attention. And then he started proposing plans. My heart clenched again, but I forced myself to stay calm. Plans? He said you were too busy with work, that you didn't even notice me. And then he started talking about your money, about the business. At first, I refused. I tried to talk him out of it, but he convinced me it was temporary, that we'd just take a small risk, and you'd never even find out. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. A risk? So, you decided to risk everything we built together for a man you barely knew? I know it was wrong, but I thought I could control it, that it would stay just between us. Her tears flowed harder, but I felt no sympathy for her. And you think I'm supposed to believe that? That you were just a victim of his manipulation? Yes, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I'm ready to fix it. I can help you. I know how he thinks. I know his plans. If you let me, I can help you stop him. I stopped and looked at her. Her eyes were filled with desperation. But was it sincerity? Why should I trust you? How can I be sure you won't betray me again when it suits you? She lowered her head, but then looked up a second later, her eyes filled with determination. Because I love you, Artem, and I'm ready to prove it. Give me a chance to show that I can be better. I looked at her silently, weighing the pros and cons. Was there a chance to fix everything? Or was it already too late? Later that night, I sat in my study, reviewing the documents we had gathered on Alex. Elisa's words swirled in my mind, and I couldn't find an answer. Could she really change? My phone vibrated on the desk. It was a message from Alex. If you think you've won, you're gravely mistaken. The room was silent. Elisa sat on the couch, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She looked defeated, but there was a shadow of tension on her face that I couldn't ignore. Her eyes kept darting toward me, as if she was waiting for me to speak. But I stayed silent. My thoughts were consumed by the message I had received from Alex a few hours earlier. His words were a direct challenge. If you think you've won, you're gravely mistaken. I didn't know what he meant, but I was certain. The game wasn't over yet. Artem! Her voice broke the silence suddenly, like a gunshot in the dark. I need to tell you something. I looked up, trying to keep my expression cold. What is it? Another detail of your games? She paled but didn't look away. It's important. It's about Alex. And me. I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid you wouldn't understand. My heart clenched. What else could she be hiding? Then don't drag it out, Elisa. I'm tired of your excuses. She took a deep breath, set the cup aside, and folded her hands in her lap as if shielding herself. It wasn't just an ordinary affair. Alex and we were together before our marriage. Her words hit me like a knife. I felt a wave of anger and outrage rising within me. What? I dated him before I met you. It was a long time ago, and I thought we were over for good. But when he came back, you decided to go back to him? While we were married? No, I didn't want to, but he started pressuring me, reminding me of the past, of how we used to be, and I broke. I stood up from my chair, feeling rage clouding my thoughts. Broke? That's your argument? You let a man you should have forgotten ruin our marriage and our lives over memories? It's not that simple, Artem. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. There's more. I looked at her, waiting for her to deliver the next blow. Alex knows everything about us, about our finances, our relationship, and he knows it because I told him. Time seemed to stop. You told him about us? My voice was barely audible, but every word carried a threat. I didn't mean to, but he used it to pressure me. He said he knew how to make us happy, that he would help if you betrayed me? She nodded, avoiding my eyes. Elisa, you handed him the keys to our lives. You let him use me, our family, our company for his dirty games. I thought it would stop. I wanted to stop him, but he started blackmailing me. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Blackmail? What could he possibly blackmail you with? What could be worse than what you've already done? She fell silent again, then whispered, He knows about the child. My heart stopped. What child? Her eyes filled with tears. Before our marriage, I was pregnant. With him. But I lost the baby. And Alex used that to manipulate me, reminding me it was my fault. I sat there, trying to process what I had just heard. She had been pregnant with Alex's child, and he used it to reel her back in. This is more than a mistake, Elisa, I finally said. This is a betrayal of everything we had. She broke into tears, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. All I saw were the ruins of our life, destroyed by her hands. Later that night, I sat in my study, going over the evidence we had gathered against Alex. It was enough to destroy him, but now I knew he was capable of much more. And the worst part, Elisa was still his pawn. A new message appeared on my phone. Are you ready for the next move? Elisa sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone screen. She was waiting for a message from Artem, who had gone out on business. Her heart was heavy with anxiety, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unsaid. Suddenly, her phone vibrated, and a message from Alex appeared on the screen. He has his secrets too, Elisa, and they're much worse. She froze. Her fingers trembled as she tapped on the message to open their chat. Alex was always careful, never saying more than necessary, but this time his words were cryptic and unsettling. What do you mean? She typed, her eyes fixed on the screen. The reply came almost instantly. Think about how easily he gathered all that evidence against me. Do you really believe he found out by accident? Elisa's heart clenched. Her thoughts began to spiral. Could Artem have known about Alex before everything came to light? Could he have been playing his own game while hiding behind the mask of a wronged husband? You're lying. You're trying to tear us apart even more, she wrote back, though her confidence was already wavering. Alex replied again. I tell you everything in person, but it's only a matter of time before you find out the truth yourself. The evening at home was heavy. Artem returned later than he'd promised, looking exhausted but calm. Elisa tried to act normal, but her thoughts wouldn't let her rest. Long day? She asked as he walked into the kitchen. Yes, long, he replied curtly, pouring himself a glass of water. She stayed silent, watching him. Her gaze was piercing, but Artem seemed uninterested. Artem, she finally began, setting her phone aside. I need to ask you something. He looked at her, a bit surprised by her tone. What is it? Did you know about Alex before everything came out? Before I confessed? He set his glass down on the table and crossed his arms. Why are you asking this now? Just tell me the truth. Her voice wavered, but she held her ground. I gathered evidence after I found out you cheated on me. It wasn't premeditated if that's what you're implying. His voice was even, But Elisa sensed something was off. And you didn't think to tell me earlier? Not after everything was exposed. You're trying to blame me for gathering evidence against the man who ruined our marriage? Are you serious, Elisa? Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of anger. Alex told me that you have your secrets too, that you've been playing this game long before I even realized it had started. Artem clenched his jaw, his eyes growing cold as ice. You're choosing to trust the man who used you for his own gain? Elisa, are you seriously listening to him right now? And what if he's not lying? What if you've been manipulating me too? The room fell silent. They stared at each other like adversaries, each waiting for the other to make a wrong move. If you don't trust me, then what's the point of trying to fix this? Artem finally broke the silence. I don't know, Elisa whispered, but I want the whole truth. From you and from him. Artem leaned closer, his voice low but sharp. If you decide to trust Alex, you won't be able to come back to me. Her hands trembled, but a new wave of determination rose in her chest. And what if he's right? What if you're not who you seem to be either? His eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to his study, leaving her alone in the kitchen. Later that night, Elisa received another message from Alex. I can prove to you that he isn't who he says he is. Tomorrow at the restaurant, 8 o'clock. Be there if you want the truth. Elisa sat in the dimly lit room, nervously clutching her phone. Alex's message was open on the screen, and his words echoed in her mind. Tomorrow at the restaurant, 8 o'clock. Be there if you want the truth. She couldn't decide what to do. Her heart was pounding so loudly it felt like the entire house could hear. She got up, paced the room restlessly, and stopped in front of Artem's study door. The light was still on. He was either working or, as always, finding new ways to bring down Alex. But now, doubt crept into her heart. What if Artem was lying too? What if he had his own hidden motives? She knocked on the door. The reply was dry and cold. Come in. Elisa opened the door and saw him at his desk. Artem didn't even look up as she entered, but his tense shoulders gave away that he was expecting a confrontation. We need to talk, she began, trying to keep her voice steady. Again, he finally looked up. His eyes were tired but sharp with suspicion. Alex messaged me. That made him lean forward. And what does he want this time? He said he wants to tell me the truth. He invited me to meet him tomorrow. Artem leaned back in his chair, his gaze turning icy. You're not seriously thinking about going, are you? And why not? If he has something important, I need to know. He stood abruptly, and now only the desk separated them. You're joking, right? You're planning to believe the man who used you and tried to destroy our lives again? What if he's right? What if he knows something you're not telling me? Artem clenched his fists, his voice hardening. And you really think he'll tell you the truth? Elisa, he's manipulating you. This is his way of tearing us apart for good. Maybe, but it's also a way for me to find out if you're really being honest with me, she shot back, her words sharp, and she saw his face tense. Are you serious? He looked at her as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. After everything I've done to protect us, you're questioning my honesty? You didn't protect me, Artem. You protected yourself. And if that means hiding something from me, then I have the right to know the truth, even if it comes from him. Artem leaned closer, his eyes blazing with anger. Why are you afraid of the truth, Artem? I'm not afraid of the truth, Elisa, but I am afraid you'll make the same mistake again. It's not a mistake if I want to know the truth. Either you're hiding something, or I'll go and find out for myself. Their argument continued, a battle where every word was a blow. Elisa felt her confidence wavering, but she couldn't bring herself to back down. Something about Alex's words felt genuine, and she needed to verify it. You're not going to him, Artem said, crossing his arms. I am, because I deserve to know the truth. And if you won't tell me, then I'll get it from him. He was silent, his face stone-like. Then he stepped back as if retreating, but his words carried a threatening edge. Fine, go. But remember, Elisa, if you take this step, there's no coming back. Her heart tightened, but she didn't respond. She simply walked out of the room, leaving him in tense silence. Late that night, Elisa sat on the bed, staring at her phone. She knew Artem wouldn't sleep tonight, just like her. Doubt and fear waged war inside her. What if Alex really knew something that could change everything? And what if Artem had been hiding the truth all along? Her phone vibrated. A new message from Alex. Don't forget. Tomorrow at 8. I'll show you who your real enemy is. The restaurant looked like it had been designed for secret meetings. Dim lighting from low-hanging lamps, the muted whispers of guests, and music that blurred the boundaries between voices. Elisa stood at the entrance, scanning the room. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Alex sat at one of the corner tables. His gaze locked onto hers the moment she stepped into the room. He smiled, a smile she had once found both charming and dangerous. But now she saw it differently. It was the smile of a manipulator who knew his prey had arrived. She walked over and sat down across from him, trying not to let her fear show. I'm here. What do you want to say? Alex leaned in closer, his voice quiet, but each word carried weight. I knew you'd come. You've always wanted the truth, even when it hurts. Cut the games. Get to the point. His smile widened. He leaned back in his chair, pulling a phone out of his pocket. All right. Straight to the point, then. Your husband, your Artem, isn't who he claims to be. Elisa sighed, her patience already wearing thin. And what's that supposed to mean? That he cheated on me too? Is that your big revelation? Alex raised a hand to stop her. No, Elisa. His betrayal is far worse. You think he's been protecting you all these years? You think he's been loyal to you? He knew about me long before we reconnected. And do you know why he let you stay after everything came to light? She said nothing, her hands tightening on the edge of the table. Because he's been using you too. Just like I did. But unlike me, he's been doing it from the very beginning. What are you trying to say? Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to remain calm. Alex leaned in, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he saw doubt flicker in her. Elisa, he didn't marry you out of love. You were a business deal to him. Your family, your status, it was all part of his plan. And when I came along, he used me to make you betray him. You handed him all the reasons to get rid of you without risking his reputation. Her heart stopped. That's not true. Artem isn't like that. He loved me. Alex pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Watch this. She hesitated but took the phone. The video that opened was from several years ago. In it, Artem was talking to another man. I know she'll make the perfect wife. Her family is everything I need to secure my position in business. The rest? It's just details. Elisa felt the blood freeze in her veins. She recognized the voice. It was Artem. This is doctored, she said, though even she could hear the doubt in her voice. Alex simply smiled. Do you really want to deny it? Think about how quickly he gathered everything on me. How carefully he planned your relationship. You were just a tool to him, Elisa. The same way you were to me. She couldn't breathe. Her world spun, and she didn't know who to believe. Why are you showing me this? Why now? Alex sighed, tilting his head slightly. Because you deserve to know who's who. And if you want to get back at him, I'll help you. But the choice is yours. She stood up, her legs trembling. I need time to think. Of course, he said, calmly leaning back in his chair. But remember, Elisa, time isn't on your side. Or his. She walked out of the restaurant, the cold air stinging her face. Her phone rang. It was Artem. She didn't answer. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Who to believe? Who to hate? She walked into the night, knowing one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same. Elisa sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. Her thoughts were shattered into tiny fragments, each screaming something different. Alex with his video, Artem with his silent stares. Both had manipulated her, and now she was at a crossroads. She stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back with force. Her decision was simple. If she trusted either of them, she'd remain a pawn in their game. No, now she would play the game herself. She picked up her phone, opened her laptop, and began working. Her goal was clear, to find answers on her own terms, even if it meant digging deeper than she ever wanted to. The first step was to determine if the video Alex had shown her was genuine. She uploaded it to a media authenticity verification site, and then reached out to a tech-savvy friend who could uncover more details about the file's creation and distribution. "Give me a day," he said over the phone. "If it's edited, I'll find traces. And if it's not, I want to know everything," she insisted, trying to sound confident. "Of course, but be careful." Whoever made this clearly knew what they were doing. The next step was digging into Artem's connections. She had always stayed away from his business, considering it men's matters, but now she regretted her indifference. She compiled a list of his partners, deals, and even tracked a few suspicious transactions through his accounts. When she discovered that one of Artem's partners had once made large transfers to Alex's company, her heart sank. Was it a coincidence? Or were Artem and Alex more connected than they seemed? The third step was going back to Alex. She didn't want a direct confrontation, but decided to exploit his weakness, his ego. "I saw the video, and it makes me doubt Artem, but I need more proof," she wrote in a message to him. The reply came almost instantly. "Of course. I knew you'd start seeing clearly. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll show you more. Artem has been playing you for years." She closed her phone and sighed. Her plan was simple: gather enough information to expose both of them. She knew she was taking a risk, but she couldn't live in ignorance any longer. The next day, when Artem returned home from work, Elisa was already waiting for him in the kitchen. She knew she had to play along until she uncovered the full truth. "You look tired," she said with a smile. "It was a long day," he replied curtly, sitting down at the table. She watched him, trying to decipher whether the man she had loved could be the one Alex had described. "Artem, have you always been honest with me?" He looked up, narrowing his eyes. "Why is this coming up again? We've already talked about this. I just want to be sure there's nothing you're hiding from me." He sighed, seeming to struggle to remain calm. "I've made mistakes, Elisa, but they were all to protect us. If that's what's worrying you, then you can stop." She nodded, though her heart was pounding. That evening, her tech friend called back. "The video is real. It hasn't been edited, and its date matches your first year of marriage." She put down the phone, feeling her world begin to crumble. Artem had really said those words. But was it part of a plan? Or just a moment of weakness? Her next step was clear: meeting with Alex. At the restaurant, Alex was already waiting for her. He looked smug, as if he knew he had won. "I knew you'd come," he said as she sat down. "What else do you have to show me?" Her voice was cold, but inside, she was boiling. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. "There's more proof here. Transcripts of conversations, financial reports. Artem has been playing his game long before you ever came into his life. And why are you doing this? What's in it for you?" He leaned in closer, his voice quiet but menacing. "Because I want you to see who truly cares about you. And it's not Artem." Elisa took the flash drive without saying another word. When she got home, she turned on her laptop and inserted the flash drive. There were countless documents, audio recordings, and even messages between Artem and his partners, and they all corroborated Alex's claims. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. The truth was clear, but she didn't know if she was ready to accept it. Her phone vibrated. It was Artem. "Are you still awake? We need to talk." The night in her house was quiet, but the silence pressed heavily on her chest. Elisa sat by the window, staring into the darkness beyond the curtains. In her hands, she clutched the flash drive that held the key to unraveling the lies and betrayals that had surrounded her. Yet now, it seemed that the truth no longer mattered. Artem was in his study. His face, when he had asked if she wanted to talk, had been tense and unreadable. Alex, with his ironic smile and the flash drive in hand, lingered in her mind like a ghost, poisoning every thought. Her world was shattered. The two men she had considered central to her life were more like adversaries than allies. One had used her to advance his business, the other to fulfill his selfish ambitions. And now, she stood between them, a pawn on their chessboard. But what if she wasn't a pawn? What if she didn't have to choose between them and simply stepped out of the game altogether? The next morning, Elisa woke up with a sense of clarity. She knew what she had to do. She wouldn't be a victim or a tool in their hands. Her life belonged to her and her alone. She got out of bed, dressed, and began packing her things. It wasn't easy. Every item she placed in the suitcase reminded her of the past, but her decision was final. As she folded the last piece of clothing, the bedroom door opened. Artem stood there, his expression filled with disbelief. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Artem. I can't be part of this anymore." "This? What are you talking about? We can fix this. We can still start over." Elisa shook her head. "You used me. So did Alex. And I can't trust either of you anymore. I want a life where it's just me and my decisions." "And what are you planning to do?" "Start fresh. Far away from both of you. This game has destroyed me, and I won't be part of it anymore." He stepped toward her, but she raised a hand to stop him. "There's nothing to say. If you truly care about me, just let me go." Artem remained silent. His eyes reflected a mix of anger, pain, and helplessness, but he didn't argue. She left the house that night. Her heart ached, but at the same time, it began to beat to a new rhythm. She didn't know what lay ahead, but the uncertainty gave her freedom. The freedom to choose. Months later, Elisa sat in a small cafe by the sea. She was working on her laptop, finally pursuing a project she had always wanted to but never dared. Her life was peaceful yet fulfilling. She had built a new circle of acquaintances, embraced her creativity, and no longer depended on anyone. The phone on the table vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "Do you really think you can just disappear?" Elisa smiled. She deleted the message without replying. Her past was behind her, and now she was looking only forward. Elisa's story was complicated and contradictory. She had betrayed herself, trusted the wrong people, but in the end, she realized the most important truth: knowing your own worth and never letting anyone destroy your individuality. Now, a question for you. Do you think Elisa made the right choice by leaving everything behind? Should she have given Artem a second chance, or returned to Alex? Share what you would have done in her place.